Hello and welcome to Second Stage. Here we are in the expo. It is filling up very nicely and I'm delighted to have two very special guests with me right now. Hot off the stage, of course, we have Andy Grabner, Kelsey Hightower. Welcome to both of you. Andy, I'll start with you. Very busy day and a half so far. There's so much that's been talked about, but what are your key takeaways?
I think my key takeaways is that finally, after 4 years of working on this, what we released the last 1.5 days, we're all excited that we finally could talk about it in public. The last couple of weeks and months was really challenging because customers have asked us, so when are you doing this and this? And said, wait a little bit, right? It was really tough to wait. And I think Bernd also said this on stage.
Right.
But it's just great to see Grail, the extensions to Grail, automation engine, app engine. The new security announcement with the tighter integration with Snook was also really great. I mean, so many cool things. Like, I've been with the company for almost 15 years, and many of our colleagues are also that long with the company, because I think also I want to give some credit to Bernd, who really is the driving force behind the innovation, and in R&D especially, he's the driving force that keeps us all as we are, as an awesome team. And if he would be here, I would have just hug him right now, I guess.
I'm sure you would.
Really awesome.
And he'd probably like that.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's interesting because a follow-up question for you. You're so relieved now because it's out, everyone knows, you can talk about it. This is not the end of the journey. In many ways, it's the start.
True, I think that's what they also said on stage, right? The whole app engine, like, we now have you guys sitting in the audience. You have a lot of possibilities now because Davis and the underlying foundation that we're building, Grail, is really just a foundation. We can solve a lot of these performance and observability use cases that we know everybody has. But like, I'm looking at you, Ustad, right? I don't know your use cases. You know your use cases much better, so you can build a purpose-built app. Looking at you, Ricardo, same thing. You guys have a lot of ideas in your brain. You have a lot of use cases in your company. Go out and build these apps and put them on the App Store so that you can benefit, but also other organizations that have the same use cases can benefit from it as well. So I think that's what I'm excited about. We enable a new wave of innovation on that platform we have.
Thank you. And Kelsey, it's not just innovation, is it? It's creativity. Now people have the freedom to creatively imagine what they can do with this.
Yeah, my first reading of what programming was, there's algorithms and data. And it's 2023, we finally have a platform that should focus on algorithms and data. And so we've come a long way, and I think that noise, once you push it to the side, people can actually focus on building things based on the actual data that they have in front of them versus figuring out how to transfer it back and forth from the network. So it's really cool to see it come full circle.
You sit in a very special position observing the industry. I would love to get some thoughts from you. Well, what do you think as a community, as an industry, we are missing in our day-to-day pursuits? Low-hanging fruit, if you will.
Honestly, patience. We've gotten addicted to 5 minutes to wow. Right, you see a new project, you go to the README, and you give it 5 minutes, download, install, and do something useful. But there's a very big difference between hello world and hello revenue. And the distance between those two dots is experience. Right. And so I think when you're introducing yourself to a new tool, it's going to be like 3 months, 6 months of production before you see all the things that are not in the docs. And then those turn into issues that get reported and bugs that need to be fixed. And then after a year, you start to have a little bit of experience. And once you have a little bit of experience, then you can start to see where the gaps are. And that's where the creativity comes in. That's when the community starts sharing, hey, after 2 years, you're going to see this. So be prepared. And here's a little tool I wrote to help you smooth out that rough edge. So I think that's the thing that we're missing is the patience for all of that to evolve.
Of course. Okay, let me challenge you on that because all of these people and everyone watching virtually, we work with larger teams, and very often our C-suites want to say hello to revenue a little bit earlier.
The benefit, though, is I think when I say patience, we're not realizing that you already have a decade of fundamentals before the product came out. And it's not that the fact that these products are new means you got to go reset everything. That means you just got to step back and say, yo, what is this product trying to achieve? What skills do I have? And then you look at the two and you figure out how do I actually get started by leveraging the things you had from the past. So you got to stop saying things like legacy infrastructure. You know, in sports, when you do a really good job for a long time, we put you in the Hall of Fame, right? And you have a legacy worth celebrating, not a legacy that people want to forget and make go away.
Right. And you're right, there's different perceptions of literally the term legacy. You said on the stage, there was one phrase I was sitting there and I heard you say it, Your role will evolve, you said to the audience. So my question to you is that a gentle way of warning us about the changes ahead?
It should be. This idea that you can keep doing the same thing, there's this trap that we fall into. There are some people who have 20 years of 1 year experience. And you just kind of get into this Westworld like loop where you just repeat the same thing over and over again. And I think the thing that we're seeing now is that whether we're a system administrator restarting servers, writing Nagio scripts, if you're old enough, you know what that is, right? And then you went from that to maybe the world of DevOps and then, of course, SRE. And you've been looking at these foundational skills, but there was some fundamental underneath it all, which is there is now going to be a reason to be a data scientist, regardless of what role you have. When the machines go and try to automate themselves, the only thing they will leave behind is that data, and that data is going to be required to be analyzed, so that way you can go back and improve the systems. And then the human element starts to bubble up. And so fundamentally, more than likely, you'll become somewhat of a data scientist over time, because that will be the main job left to do.
That's very interesting. Andy, I want to ask you about that. You know, you look at your career, your time with Dynatrace, your entire history, of course. How have you handled that challenge to evolve, to find those new skills to allow you to play the role that is needed at any point?
It's a good question. I think I was never afraid of change. And I think I learned this actually from my dad. We talked about this maybe last year. My dad grew up post-World War II, very poor and farm. That was not really doing well back then. Right? He was actually the youngest kid that was then put on actually running it. And when we did a road trip together years ago, this is really when we became close, because when I was young, I didn't really have a whole lot of time. But he told me that in order for him to survive back then, he just had to take a lot of risk. Right? He also said, though, and that was some quotes, in Austria it translates, in German it translates better, but basically it means everybody's cooking with water. So that means don't be afraid, first of all, of what others do, because where they are, they also started from the same thing, right? Because we all cook with water. That's one thing. The next thing he told me is you got to talk with people and figure out what they want, and never be afraid of try something new. And I think he managed to get from where he was when he was 14 years old, taking over the farm back then, to where he then left us as kids very well off. And I think that kind of, I think this is where I have my motivation from. And I know I don't fear change. I see change as a great opportunity.
It's a great opportunity, great story as well. Thank you so much for that. Kelsey, you talked about boundaries up and down the stack, but are there any other interesting boundaries use cases that you can share with us?
Yeah, I think we're seeing a lot of boundary improvements in the runtime space. You know, WASM is getting a lot of talking these days, and it's all because of that sandbox. Today, apps, most people don't know what system calls their application is making. And so what we do is we try to install all of these security products to try to give us a sense of what normal is. And then we go from there to say, if we see something that's abnormal, we may assume that this could be a security problem. Whereas in the sandbox case with WASM, the idea is to limit and restrict tightly what can ever happen in that sandbox. And because of that new boundary, you're watching, whether it's your networking provider, your CDN, something like Cloudflare, and now something like Dynatrace, that now we can actually start running untrusted code in the actual platform that is hosting our data. That was never something we would ever imagine before we started to have this very restricted sandbox. So this WASM idea is flipping things on its head and saying, how about we be very intentional at the very bottom of the stack, and then we allow people to do more interesting things without necessarily worrying about one person violating someone else's data sovereignty.
It's a very interesting approach. And there was a reference or two to SLOs, Andy. What are the best ways to create SLOs?
An interesting segue. From the SLO perspective, where we talked about the boundaries, and we were in the session together. He did me a favor yesterday in our SLO done right. He sat in the first row, and everybody was really happy that you were there. It was a session on SLOs, and what I realized, what I did wrong all these years when I started talking about SLOs, I always thought about you need to put an SLO on everything, CPU, on memory, and response time, and then coming to the boundaries. We have clearly defined boundaries as we build software. We mentioned it today. Right? We have a boundary around the service, backend service like authentication, purchase, whatever it is. We have a boundary around the application. These are how the users interact with your app. And then we have a business boundary because you have clear business goals. We saw the business revenue stream app that we showed, right? How many people get on the website, how many do they buy, how is the order process, and so on. So from an SLO perspective, if we have these boundaries, it means we have clear contracts, as you said, and in order to enforce a contract, you need to know what violates the contract and what doesn't violate the contract. So the best SLO to start with is figuring out what is your contract. If you're a service developer, your contract is my service needs to be up at a certain time and needs to provide a certain performance. If an application owner, your SLO has to be that your users can actually use these features. And as a business owner, you then need to figure out how to optimize the end-to-end business flow. And therefore, you have to specify SLOs there. So business, app, service. These are where the SLOs are. And it's basically the boundaries of your system, the app, or the business.
Very nice, thank you. Kelsey, Andy mentioned it on the stage during the show. You are so good at explaining very complex thoughts, ideas in this space. And you do it in a very simple, relatable manner. I've heard many analogies you drop in, so powerful. Why do you think so many people in our industry struggle with achieving that?
In our profession, you can get really far without empathy. If you learn how to write code, a product manager may say, hey, here's a list of features. You're like, do you want the website red, yellow, or green? Little CSS, it's red now. Let me know when you want to change the color. And you can be fine. You never have to meet any of your customers. You never actually have to be a customer yourself. You can have someone else decide if it's right or wrong. And so a lot of times we're just doing things almost as a robot would do, void of empathy, right? We used to have this trope around system administration, just sit in the basement and tell people no, or decide what people can and can't do. And so I think a lot of times we've gotten really far by not necessarily being human. And you can get penalized for bringing emotion to a discussion. I don't think that's the right thing to do. And then people will ask you, well, what should we do? Now the onus is on you to think beyond the requirements. And a lot of people are not interested in thinking beyond the requirements. So we keep our mouth shut. We take those requirements, we implement it, we check in the code, and off we go. And so that means we leave very little room for the human interactions. And the last thing I'll say here is, a lot of times we just rush through life so fast. Most of my analogies come from just paying attention to normal human interactions, right? Like when we talked about SLOs, for example, one way to explain how to pick the best SLO, think about your normal human interactions. You're at your desk working on something, and the team says, hey, we got a new app. What's the first thing you ask? What does it do? Well, this app will allow people to log in using their Facebook login, their Twitter login, or their GitHub login. So you already know what the first service level objective, the objective of this app in its entirety, is so that people can log in. So that's the first thing you code up. If no one's able to log in, or they stop being able to log in, you failed the initial objective, and we should wake up and do something about it. But that's a much easier way to explain how to understand these complex concepts by explaining them through the normal human interaction we all do.
And just to extend this, because I think this is fascinating, and this is really across the entire tech industry, is very often at this level of genius and brilliance, we forget to translate the knowledge we have into the language of the person listening.
There's a saying that there are some people who have ideas and there are some ideas that have people. And the difference between those two things is your ability to communicate. And I think when we do figure out a way of communicating, often it's not done by the person who created the technology, it's done by the person who understands the technology, and then they go out and explain it to the whole world, and then that's how you move people forward.
Yeah, very good, thank you. There is so much excitement over AI. ChatGPT is like the first really strong consumer-centric AI, and it's been embraced at incredible speeds. How do we make sure that we keep humanity at the center of what comes next in the development of this technology?
One of the things that I think is very unfortunate, I remember watching Westworld on HBO for the first time, and you see these, and if you don't know the plot of it, you got these people that don't realize that they're not people, because their whole inner life interaction is pre-scripted, and they follow this loop, and they have no idea they're on it. Then one day they wake up and start to realize that something's wrong here. I'm now becoming self-aware. I think society has been trending in this direction for a long time. Like, even I am guilty of this. There are things that I no longer store in memory because I know I can search for it and find it instead. And there's something we lose when that happens. And so I think when it comes to ChatGPT, and I said this early on the stage, ChatGPT should be the bar, the minimum bar of creativity. I think people get really excited because they can tell a program, create an image for me. And they get really excited. Oh my God, it created this image. But what happened to the part where you go and play with watercolors and see how far you can push your own boundaries? The reason why we like live sports, we want to see what humans can do given the limitations we have. And this is why we cheer when we see a human do something that we think was humanly impossible. This is why we don't like when people cheat. And the reason why we get more, we're more excited to see it happen in real life instead of a video game. Because we know how hard it is to overcome and train and push the boundary. So that's the way I think about ChatGPT and its relationship to humans.
No, I like that. I think in many ways, the onset of AI, giving everyone a very easy way just to reply to emails, for example, it might start to isolate those with real skills and talents, though that humanity suddenly will rise up above the noise.
You're giving all of this excitement to artificial intelligence when you're sitting there with real intelligence. And there's this part where we start respecting what intelligence is. The fact that a bird can fly is a form of intelligence. And we're here sitting like that. We've lost all value in real intelligence, and we're sitting here praying to artificial intelligence. We've gone wrong somewhere.
Very good. I'll come to you here in the room for a couple of questions in just a moment. If you have one, raise your hand. We'll get a microphone to you. But here's the rule. No monologues. Keep them short. Andy, I wanted also to get your commentary on what you're seeing in the world of AI. From your perspective, is there anything you would add to what Kelsey's been saying?
Well, I want to just give a little context on how AI matters in Dynatrace, right? We have the Davis AI. You guys all know about this, and I think Bernd also alluded yesterday a little bit to that. You will be able to teach Davis your particular semantics. I think that's the key thing, right? We can only know so much about your system. We can only alert the things that we think the system should do. But we don't know, to your example, right, that login has to work for Twitter, Facebook, and GitHub. This is something you need to tell the AI. Then there will be more things coming, I think, where we really allow you to put in your business ideas or your business constraints into the AI so that you really fully leverage Davis, not just for what you're doing right now, and figuring out if systems are behaving correctly, if they're available. There's much more we can do. I think this is what I'm looking forward for from a Dynatrace perspective.
Very nice.
And I add one more thing to
Of
the AI
course.
thing. I think it's super important right now that people actually understand how this actually works. I did a really good Twitter space with a guy named Gary Marcus. He wrote this book, Rebooting AI. And these are AI critics, right? I think ChatGPT is a phenomenal thing, and we shouldn't all over-index on the criticism of these. But I think there's a part around education. How does it work? Today, if you're presented with data, we write very explicit code. If X is true, then do the thing. Right? And we hard code these things, and the truth is, that's not necessarily how the real world interacts with each other. You will never understand every interaction to create the perfect state machine that can deal with them all. And so today we call that just imperative programming. We all do it. In the case of machine learning, we have a framework. In simple terms, you can think of it like code generation. But instead of you writing if statements, you're trying to present your model. They're not as good as humans, but in very specialized tasks, those models like when to alert, what is normal. And so when we say train the machine, we're not like talking about training the human. We're literally telling the machine what our mental model of this very hyper-specific domain. And instead of writing if statements, it can now evaluate that model against the data that's flowing in. And remember, it's guessing. It's guessing. It's giving you an approximation that, hey, based on the model, based on the data, I have this probability that this is a problem. But I don't know. Only you do. And so I think when it comes to AI, we need to demystify it. So if AI isn't your jam, you should probably still understand how it actually works so you know how to actually leverage it, even in a system like your observability platform.
Very good. Thank you for that. All right, I'll take a question also. Yes, let's get a mic to the front and keep it nice and short. Thank you.
On topic of ChatGPT, I've heard people say that the future of programming languages may just be English, the ability just to speak what you want and have it turn into code. I guess two quick questions: do you think something is lost there if that turns out to be the case? And then, ironically, that makes it almost more human. Is that something that we should kind of move towards?
I appreciate that. Thank you.
I'm gonna blow your mind. You ready? It's already that way. Think about it. When someone says they want you to build something, how do they tell that to you? They use whatever language to I would like you to build a website to do X. So you're already getting the prompt in English. It's just today, our tools are articulating that and turning it into something the computer understands. We have to necessarily write code. Our compiler actually turns it into actual code it understands, and off we go. There's a feedback loop to that. So instead of writing a bunch of raw code, we now use libraries where the code has already been written. The difference between that model and me telling ChatGPT to do it, at the end of the day, the machine is still responsible for executing these instructions. So whether we say it's ChatGPT or the C++ compiler, the intermediate step is roughly the same. So to me, ChatGPT becomes a better form of auto-GPT.
Very interesting. So learn to code becomes learn to communicate.
I think that's always been the challenge. Learn to communicate, and the code part becomes the easier part of the equation.
Thank you for that. We have a question at the back. We'll take this one. We're out of time, so I'm wary of time. If you're good, we'll stay another minute.
Yeah, so just a question about AI and creative applications, specifically, for example, in the music industry where it's been used very successfully, although to some people's opinion, to the detriment of quality of music, like I'd say many people's opinion, like what responsibility do dev teams have to prevent a decline in cultural artifacts, the quality of cultural artifacts as an effect of our work? Or do we have that obligation?
Thank you for that.
You know, data doesn't make decisions. People do. And so when we think about these various tools that can generate things, you still have to decide, is this the picture you want to frame? You have to decide whether you have taste, and then people will respond. Because if you make a song and no one likes it, it doesn't matter how it was generated. So I think humans have been really good at being tastemakers. Like, think about the process of making a song. You come up with an idea, you create the song. If you're smart, you go and play that song to a small audience and see how they respond. You may even take it to a local DJ at a small club just to see how a bigger group of people respond. And if you like what you hear and if they like what they hear, then you know you got something, right? And you got a sound. The worst thing that happens, though, is when 500,000 artists all sound the same. You can't name any artists, and you figure that they all make the same song. I think that is unfortunate. But on another hand, it does democratize the ability to create music. And so it's a gift and a curse, but I think the people that will float to the top are the people who try something that is unheard of, unorthodox, and we get a new genre that spawns, and ChatGPT will be waiting for that input in order for it to create something based on this new explored territory.
I think that's great. We as humans still have to provide the differentiator. All right, last question, because our time is up. I want you to put your future on, and you can take this any way you like. What do you hope, what do you think is next? When you look into the future, you can talk about anything from data science, observability, AI, take it where you will, but futurist hats on, Andy.
It's a very tough question. First of all, my futurist hat, next year I want to sit here again with Kelsey. People have been asking for this already. I can just repeat from a Dynatrace perspective, I hope we unleash something with the platform. That's really what I want to make sure that you understand. We also saw the carbon footprint app that they showed at the very end. I think we have an opportunity and also an obligation as humans to make sure we are using the data that we have the best ability to make sure we actually can stay living on this planet, right? And actually reducing carbon footprint is one great use case for it. But I'm sure there's many more that I can think of because I only have limited thoughts based on my input I've received over my life. So that's why I hope we will be sitting here in the future and we see what magic things happened because we did this announcement.
Andy, thank you very much. Kelsey.
My hope is you understand how much impact you have on what the future is. If you think about when people say the future, it's easy to predict the future when you're working on it. And so whatever's broken now, there's going to be someone that says, I think I can fix it. That person decides what the future will be because everyone else is waiting for it to be fixed. And so I think going forward, to me, the future is, there's this incremental step that we take. Some people are not paying attention. They check in every 5 to 10 years and it feels like a massive leap. But if you want want to know what the future will be, decide to work on the existing problems that are in front of you. And if you do come up with something, I guarantee you that will be the future. You know, the difference is you'll be able to explain it.
Saying we can create our own future. I love that. Ladies and gentlemen, a big thank you, of course, to Kelsey Hightower, Andy Grabner. Thank you both so much.